Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So it's Tuesday, which means it's time for our tier list Tuesday. Every single Tuesday on this channel, we give a tier list, and I've been breaking down my early season predictions from a team perspective, but I thought it'd be a fun idea to go through each subset of the said team's forward core, defense core, and goalie tandem. So on this tier list Tuesday, we're starting with the forward core. We'll do the defense core next week, and then the goalie tandems the week after. But yeah, there was a lot of notable free agents that ended up free agent forwards that switched teams. So some of these forward cores are not radically different, but they are different. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's get into the tier list. Up first, the Anaheim Ducks. We got just our basic, great, good, solid, meh, bad. If you've been following the page, you know that's the go-to. Up first for the Anaheim Ducks, I'm going to go with meh. I do think that McTavish, I do think Carlson are going to take a step this year. They didn't really sign anybody of note, but I think when looking at the Anaheim Ducks, their clear strength, they are going to be a bottom five team, but is the forward core. And I think with some internal Cutter Gauthier coming in, I think can be an immediate impact guy, 30 and 30 arguably. So I'm going to go with the Anaheim Ducks and meh. Boston Bruins, yes, they brought in Lindholm. I'm still not that high overall on their forward core. Outside of Pasta, they don't really have another star. Marchand is a very good two-way first liner at this point, but he is no longer a true star in the NHL. So when looking at it, on top of Coyle, Zacha, they did lose Jake DeBrusk. It's just not that impressive in my opinion. So I like their defense core. I like their goalie. Even with Korpisalo, I still like their goaltending situation. But the forward core, in my opinion, still is just solid. Last year, honestly, it was probably in like meh, but now it's up to solid after a big acquisition in Elias Lindholm. Buffalo Sabres, I'm going to go with meh, dude. They bought out Jeff Skinner. You thought that they were going to be very aggressive this offseason. They replace him. They didn't even replace him. They replaced him with goddamn Jason Zucker. So unless guys like Benson, Peterka take like massive steps, which I'm not saying they aren't, but they're going to have to take pretty sizable steps and be impact like second liners as soon as next season. I think heading into next year, they are a pretty meh forward core overall. Next up, we got the Calgary Flames, and they're one of the worst forward cores in the entire NHL coming into the season. Looking at it, they traded Lindholm last year during the season. They ended up trading Andrew Mangiapane. They did bring in Anthony Mantha, but their lead forwards are going to be like Nazem Kadri, who's still a pretty good player. The corpse of Jonathan Huberdeau for the most part. Guys like Connor Zary, who I'm high on going forward, but he's like their third or fourth best forward probably next season. Andrei Kuzmenko is going to be interesting a full season in Calgary. It's not good, but rightfully so. They're kind of designed to tank this season. Carolina, I'm going to go with solid after losing a lot of pieces. They no longer have a lot of depth within their forward core. They still have guys like Andrei Svechnikov, Seth Jarvis, and Sebastian Aho that I like a lot, but in prior years, their bottom six was one of the best bottom sixes in the entire NHL, and now it's just perfectly middle of the pack, and they don't really have any of those high offensive ceiling guys. Again, I really like Sebastian Aho. I really like Svechnikov, especially Aho's two-way game, but in terms of a goal-scoring forward core, it's not really up there in my opinion. The Chicago Blackhawks made a bunch of acquisitions. They probably went from the worst forward core in the entire NHL last year, arguably probably behind the San Jose Sharks, to now being like the fourth or fifth worst. I don't think Tyler Bertuzzi and Teuvo Teravainen, or even another progression from Connor Bedard, Frank Nazar stepping up next season, is going to get them out of kind of that bad tier. Next year, they'll take a jump. Then they'll continue to take a jump, continue to ascend. But next year, it is still a pretty bad forward core. The Colorado Avalanche, not the most impressive bottom six, but when looking at their top six, when looking at their top line of guys like Mikko Rantanen, Nathan MacKinnon, as well as solid pieces like Arturi Lehkonen, I like a lot. Casey Middlestat, full season as a second line center. It's still good. They're going to be scoring a shit ton of goals. Columbus did get Sean Monahan, but still, I'm not that impressed with Columbus's overall forward core. Maybe Johnny Gaudreau bounces back. Boone Jenner, I think, dealt with some injuries last year. Adam Fantilli should take a step. Kent Johnson maybe should take a step, but still doesn't really impress me in any regard, so I'm going to go with bad. The Dallas Stars, put them in great. They're still extremely deep, even though, no, they actually are bringing back basically everybody, but they let Tanev go in order to keep Matt Duchene. They are fully three lines deep, and Wyatt Johnston and Maverick Bourque should only get better this season. Logan Stade-Coven should only get better this season. Well, Maverick Bourque didn't even play last year, but Maverick Bourque stepping in as a goddamn bottom sixer after being like top three in the entire AHL in points per game. They're going to have a great forward core. The Detroit Red Wings, I'm going to go with solid. I'm going to put them in solid right now. I really like their top six as long as Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko keep on playing at a high level. Bottom six does scare me a little bit, but that top line of Larkin, DeBrincat, and Raymond is arguably a top 10 line in the entire NHL. So overall, I'm going to go with solid. The Edmonton Oilers, great, no doubt, especially after adding Jeff Skinner, Victor Arvidsson to already arguably the most high-flying offense in the entire NHL. They're going to be great. I bet on them to lead the entire NHL in goals this season. Florida Panthers, probably great last year in the playoffs. They did lose some pieces. They lost Vladimir Tarasenko. They lost Ryan Lundberg. They lost a lot of their depth that made them so great. Still, that top 6 is probably top 3 in the entire NHL, but no longer have that depth similarly to a Carolina Hurricanes, so they go from like great probably to good. The LA Kings, I'm gonna put them in solid. They did lose, even though he's massively overpaid, they did lose PLD. When looking at it, they brought in Warren Fogle, not a big fan of that, but they still have some solid players. Kopitar, Byfield, Kempe, Fiala, why am I blanking on Philly Deneau? So when looking at it, I still think that they have a solid forward core. It's not the most explosive one, but it's a very solid two-way forward core. The Minnesota Wild really like their top 6. I think Boldy is really going to emerge as a legit superstar, especially if he's playing on that line of Joel Eriksson Ek and Kaprizov. But similarly to some of these other teams, I'm not really that impressed with the bottom 6 until guys like, well, hopefully Liam Ogren actually gets some full-time NHL run. I think he's probably going to play in the AHL. But once Ogren and Yurov really establish themselves at the NHL level, I think they're going to be a good, maybe even great forward core, but next season I still think they lack some depth. The Montreal Canadiens, I'm going to go with meh. I do think some of their young guys are going to take steps. Still, Slavkovsky isn't some star yet. Cole Caulfield, I need to see him actually score over 30 goals in a season before we label him as one of the best goal scorers in the entire NHL. But as long as Kirby Dach is healthy and some of their other guys stay healthy that have dealt with injuries, they should be like between like the 20th and 24th best forward core in the entire NHL. Nashville took a massive step. Probably last year they were in meh, I'd argue. Outside of that top line of Nyquist, Forsberg, and Ryan O'Reilly, I really wasn't impressed after that. They bring in Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault. I don't love the contracts on a long-term basis, but Stamkos and Marchessault are going to be very good players next year for the Nashville Predators, so they bump all the way up to good. I'm going to get killed for this. New Jersey Devils, I'm going to put them in great. I think that they are going to be a great forward core. I still really love that top 6 of guys like Hughes, Bratt, Hischier, Timo Meier, and also they brought in some pretty big solid depth pieces like Stefan Noesen, Paul Cotter they brought in as well. So I'm pretty high in the New Jersey Devils. I've made that pretty apparent, and I think it really starts with their forward core. I think that's the best asset of their team right now. The New York Islanders, I'm not going to be biased. I'm just going to put them in okay. I think that they are a little bit underrated when looking at it. Guys like Kyle Palmieri scored 30 goals last year. Brock Nelson's one of the best second-line centers in the entire NHL. And I think Anthony Duclair is really going to mesh on that first line if he plays with Horvat and Barzal. But they still don't really have any legit superstars on top of their system. I'm not sure they're going to be absolutely firing goals, maybe under Patty Waugh, but it's an okay one. The New York Rangers, good, very good top 6. I do have some worries about their bottom 6, but when looking at it, hopefully Riley Smith can acclimate to that team, can be the top line right wing, because when looking at it, Zibanejad, Kreider, Smith, if that line can be effective, on top of Trocheck, Lafreniere, and Panarin being one of the best lines in the NHL last year, I think the New York Rangers definitely have a good forward core heading into next season. The Ottawa Senators, I'm going to go with okay. I think they are a sneaky one. I think they maybe could enter are good next year. It's going to be pretty important that Josh Norris gets back from his shoulder injury. When the guy's healthy, he can be a very good second-line center, but they already have Shane Pinto that's probably the second-line center. But yeah, when looking at them, other guys like Ridley Gregg really emerged last season, and then you got that top line of Stützle, Chuck, and Giroux that I think is very good. I'm going to get killed if I put the Ottawa Senators in good. I'm thinking about it, though. I'm going to keep them there. I might switch some of these up. I feel like I'm going to have way too many teams in solid, so I might have to switch stuff up. Philadelphia Flyers, it's a lot of like good second liners. If I would describe the Philadelphia Flyers forward core, it's nothing special, but it's just a lot of above average players within their top 9. Besides Travis Konechny, I do think Travis Konechny is an elite player, but I'm going to put him in meh. Pittsburgh, I'm honestly going to put him in meh as well, especially after Evgeny Malkin kind of fell off a decent amount last year. Maybe a guy like Kevin Hayes can find his game, but let's be honest, he's probably not. It's just Crosby for the most part at this point. Brian Rust is still a very, very good complimentary piece for Crosby. Raquel needs to bounce back in a massive way, but I think heading into this season, you got to be pretty disappointed in the Pittsburgh Penguins forward core. San Jose Sharks brought in guys like Wenberg and Toffoli, but I think it probably is the worst forward core in the entire NHL, so they stay in bad. Seattle Kraken, perfectly meh for the most part. I don't know. They did bring in Chandler Stevenson. Not a fan of that long term, but he should be a decent add next season. No real actual difference makers in that forward core. I like Jared McCann a lot. I think Beniers is going to get back on track, but they don't really have any notable studs in that forward core. St. Louis Blues, I'm going to put them in okay. Although I'm not that high in the St. Louis Blues, that's more so because I think the defense and the goaltending tandem is going to fall off a bit next season. But they still have very solid pieces in the forward core. The big three of Kyrou, Thomas, and Buchnevich. A guy like Jake Neighbors took a massive step next year, so I think they're actually going to be a pretty solid forward core. The Tampa Bay Lightning, I'm gonna put them in good. Again, they have a pretty bad bottom six, but when looking at the top six, when looking at Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov, Jake Gensel, those are three legit stars. Point and Kucherov are legit superstars, as well as Hagel and Cirelli are very, very good second liners if they're playing on your second line. I think Cam Atkinson will bounce back. Nick Paul's a very good third line center, so I'm gonna go good for the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Toronto Maple Leafs, similarly to Tampa Bay, I don't like their bottom six, but they have actual superstar difference-making talent within the top six. The bottom six is not looking good. It's like Pontus Holmberg, Max Domi, Yarncroc, Ryan Reeves. Hopefully Easton Cowan gets some run with the third line because he probably is going to be one of the better players in their bottom six if they let him play. Utah Hockey Club, it really just depends what happens with Michelli, Cooley, and Gunther. If they take another step, I think it's definitely in solid. Right now, I am going to go with Med because outside of Clayton Keller, they don't have any serious offensive difference maker right now, at least. The Vancouver Canucks, I can make an argument for great. I think they actually do have some solid depth across the lineup. It's tough. I liked that they didn't bring back Lindholm long term, but I think in the short term he's about the same player as DeBrusk. I'm going to put them in good right now, but I feel like I'm going to end up moving them up potentially. When looking at them, they have the three studs in their forward core, as well as some solid depth pieces. Dakota Joshua bringing back was massive for them. On top of DeBrusk, I think is going to strive in a big way with Elias Pettersson if they end up playing together. Vegas, it's a pretty disappointing forward core once you get past Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, William Karlsson. I feel like I'm forgetting someone else, but the depth is just not there, especially after losing Marchessault, Mantha, and Stevenson. Their forward core is arguably the biggest weakness of this entire team. It's definitely more of a defense core-based team, considering they have that big three of Hanifin, Theodore, and Pietrangelo. They might be struggling for goals, especially considering how injury-prone their forward core is. The Washington Capitals, I might get hate for this. I think Washington's going to be a solid competitive team, but I actually think it is a pretty meh forward core. Still don't have any legit stars in that forward core. Ovechkin has been regressing, still doesn't play defense. Dylan Strome and PLD, I guess you can sell me on. They're both like good second line centers at their best. PLD was not a good second line center this year, but if they're playing at their best, you can maybe make up for the fact that neither are an actual number one center, that they're both high-end second line centers. I like the moves that they're making, but I still think the defense core is definitely the strength of this. Defense core and goaltending more so, I would say, are strengths after they went out and get Chychrun, went out and get Matt Roy on top of a Thompson and Lindgren goalie tandem. I think that's more so the strength of their team compared to, say, the forward core. And then lastly, the Winnipeg Jets. I think it's a good forward core. I like the top line of Scheifele, Connor, and Velarde. When Velarde was healthy, that was a very good line. Although they lost to Foley and Monahan, they still got guys like Cole Perfetti I think could really break out. Nikolai Ehlers, until he's traded, I'm going to assume that he's on the goddamn team. Adam Lowry's a fantastic third line center. Mason Appleton's a pretty good bottom sixer. I'm forgetting one other guy. Nino Niederreiter is still a very good player. So although I am pretty low in Winnipeg, if you watched yesterday's video, I still do think that they have a good forward core. Overall, I still think they probably are going to be a playoff team. But yeah, let me know in the comments, what do you think about this? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? It kind of is just a reflection on my season predictions for next year. So yeah, let me know. I'll be seeing the next one.